Hello, and welcome to Animazing, the stories of Kevin Seymour. I'm your host, Aramis, and this is episode 8 of the show. This will be quick stories from Ghost in the Shell and Catnapped. So, first things first, I got to have a lovely chat with Mary Claypool from Magnitude 8, and hear a few different stories which I will be saving some for later. But for right now, I want to at least tell two. One pertaining to the movie Catnapped, which was my third episode of the show, and the other pertaining to Ghost in the Shell, which was my first episode of the show. I will start with Catnapped as it was my favorite of the two thus far. First and foremost, with the writing of Catnapped, there really wasn't a formal translation of the film as it was a smaller project. So Mary essentially had to write it from scratch for the most part. Of course, being given story beats and plot points and synopsises and all that fun stuff. But what she told me was she wrote it with her 4-year-old daughter at the time in mind. So to me, it feels like it's meant for a kid. And I think Mary's writing style for the film, considering she didn't have very many children's movies that she got to work on, was phenomenal. And according to her, it is still her daughter's favorite film, in which by now she is 29 years old. It is also one of Mary's favorite films that she ever got to write for. As I mentioned before, it was a children's film, which if you've watched Ghost in the Shell, if you've seen any of the other darker Animaze titles, you know that 95% of their catalog was very dark, gritty, adult films with, I want to say, Catnapped and Go Panda Go as two of the more child-friendly. That's the best way I'm going to be able to put that. So when they finished working on this, they didn't exactly advertise it properly, and Mary noticed this, and she told me that she offered to basically write up commercials, visual, audible commercials you'd see on TV, to air. She'd even get some of the voice actors to come in for free to record said commercials because of the children's movie, you know? And if you're not reaching the children, then how are you selling this? And this came out, on VHS and DVD with the, I think it was a VHS English dub, VHS English sub, and then, of course, the DVD copy. And they just never pulled the trigger. So I was actually able to track down a poster for Catnapped, specifically the ones that they would probably hang at retail stores. And I'll be posting a picture of that later on my Instagram, and I will link that to this podcast episode once it comes in. And as I mentioned, it shows those original prices being, I want to say, $14.99, $19.99, and $24.99. My post will correct that down below in the comments. Relatively cheap, but there were no advertisements, so it just kind of faded into obscurity. Hence, Mary's surprised that I knew about the film in the first place. It was one of the first ones that I learned about because I talked to Sandy Fox about Kevin, Animaze, and it was one of her favorites. And I'm looking forward to talking with her about it more once I'm able to get her in for an interview. But I can see why. Her performance was stellar, and she carried the character of Miko phenomenally. Now, with all that said, if you want to watch Catnapped for yourself, I do have it linked on my YouTube channel. It is free to watch on YouTube or the Internet Archive, wherever you prefer to watch your videos, and is honestly, so far, one of my top 3 Animaze dubs. My last note before I move on is in regards to some of the character work. Me and Mary were talking about it. Mary Elizabeth McGlynn's performance as Boobarina, the trio that was Simon Prescott, Michael Forrest, and Michael Sorich, playing Hinoji, Hoi Hoi, and Sudaboke. I got the order wrong, but I got their names right, so we're going with that. Of course, Leah, Tom Weiner as Son Dada, and I didn't realize whenever I was recording the last few episodes that Tom did pass away in 2024. So may he rest in peace. And may his legacy live on in the work that he has provided to us in the form of film, television, both live action and voiceover. Now to move on to something completely different. With Ghost in the Shell, we take a look at Mary also being the lead writer for this one as well as Catnapped. Now the first thing I want to get out of the way is I learned that Kevin Seymour, who was credited as a writer, that was by accident. Mary was the sole writer for Ghost in the Shell. And so whenever they were putting the credits on the film, when they accidentally put Kevin's on there as well, they just decided to keep it there. There really was no point removing it, as Kevin had multiple credits under multiple pseudonyms. But I do find that fascinating, and I did want to get that on record, that Mary was the sole writer for Ghost in the Shell. Moving on, though, she wrote the script in 2 weeks. 2 weeks to essentially adapt a Japanese film. She went over there to Japan for a week and then came back and continued writing. And some of these scenes she had to rewrite on the fly because of, for one reason or another, the mouth flaps didn't work out. I'm going to get to that in a minute because there's a great story on that. But she was given basically 144p footage to work with while she was writing the script and making sure that all of the lines matched up with the mouth flaps that she could see, while Yutaka and all of them were given crisp footage to work with. And as such, she was hammering this stuff out. And when they got specifically to the interrogation scene with Doug Stone's character of the garbage collector being interrogated by Christopher Joyce's Tokusa, essentially you had, I want to say Mary said it was Kevin, running down the hall, basically saying that she did not write to the existing mouth flaps in the scene, because as I mentioned, they had the higher res footage, and she didn't see any whenever she was writing for it. So she essentially said, give me 20 minutes, kicked him out, and then proceeded to rewrite the whole scene to match the new footage that she was now aware of. And that scene was written in 20 minutes. And that baffles me because it is a very memorable scene. And it just shows how well of a writer, how great of a writer Mary is. And one more note I do want to make. According to Mary, same as Catnapped, the original translation script that they were given was just nowhere near what the final product was going to be. I think it was a direct translation, but I haven't had the opportunity to see it for myself. I'm going to follow up with Mary on that later. But I do want to reiterate that I am ever grateful for Mary's help on this project. I got to speak with her for around 3 hours about Kevin, about Animaze, about some of the projects she's written for, both with Animaze and not with Animaze. So if you've ever seen The Gremlins 2, she wrote the famous kitchen scene with all of them, which is insane. And go check out her other credits. I want to say they're on IMDb, but I could be mistaken. But she wrote my favorite series of all time, the scripts for it anyway, which is Code Geass. And I kind of nerded out with her on that, brought up some fun memories for her. But just the way that she was able to write for not only the characters, because Kevin was very knowledgeable about each character, but for the actor that played them, matching their tempo. Somebody like Jameson has a much slower tempo. So being able to match that when she's writing is phenomenal. And what's funny is you can tell that she knows the actors who play what character. That was a line right there. Who play what now? Whenever we were talking about Ghost in the Shell, we brought up Tokusa. She mentioned Crispin, which was the SAC. So Ghost in the Shell, standalone complex actor, which is the more common one that people know, along with Mary Elizabeth McGlynn's The Major. But it just goes to show that you write for so long, you get to know the characters that you write for and the actors who play them. Moving on, because I know I can nerd out to Code Geass for as long as the sun rises, and those episodes will be coming. I'm saving them for a little bit later in the year, because I'm going to be covering them in either 2 episode blocks or even 3 episode blocks. And on some of the episodes, it will just be one episode if it's like a big one with a lot of characters, a lot of dialogue. But the more action ones I can clump together. Now, with some of those additional stories out of the way, and I will probably be doing this in the future unless I want to redo an entire episode just to include these stories, or I want to do a guest appearance by a specific actor. I plan on doing these as to add on to prior episodes. Now, to get some housekeeping out of the order, I do plan on speaking to Les Claypool, hopefully, in the next few weeks. I know after talking to Mary, she said that Les did want to speak with me, and I'm really looking forward to that. I would have spoken with Mary more, but they had Anime Los Angeles, which if you got to go out and see their panels, I think they had 3. Then I am very jealous because those would have been a blast to see. On that note, a few little announcements on my end just for conventions. At the NostalgiaCon shows, I currently have the opportunity to either meet again or meet for the first time Johnny Young Bosch, Joshua Seth, Richard Epcar, Mona Marshall, Kari Walgren, Michelle Ruff, and a few more that I may or may not be privy to. So stay tuned to my socials to see more of that, and hopefully I get some of them or all of them on the show to share their stories. I should have more stories for y'all for the next episode, or I might release just a bonus episode if there's a really good story I want to tell, or if I can sit down with somebody and get a quick story for an episode. Moving on, though, just to some housekeeping and some other information, kind of tie this thing together in a nice, clean bow. I want to talk about the show I just got back from, which was IkiCon in Round Rock, Texas at the Kalahari. I got to meet Jason Miller, who, for all intents and purposes for my show, was in Code Geass as one of the 4 swordsmen, Urabe, along with Steve Staley, Laura Bailey, and Joe Ramersa, with Steve Bloom leading the charge as their leader. But I did get to talk with him a little bit about Kevin. I had heard about a fun story where 3 of his shows, it was Digimon, a commercial that for, I think it was a product that he was selling, or it was his company, and then Code Geass, where Digimon, it was his lines that ended it, then the commercial break, because it was Adult Swim, so it was only the one commercial, followed by Urabe being one of the first lines in that episode, so it was Jason all the way. But if you're not familiar with Jason and you're a nerd, you can check out his Behind the Voice Actors page. I would know him from Final Fantasy XIV as Raoban, and he sung some of the music that appeared in Final Fantasy XIV's 2 expansions, Shadowbringers and Endwalker. 3 expansions, that including Dawn Trail. For Shadowbringers, he sung the titular Shadowbringers theme. He sung To the Edge, which was the final boss music for the last patch, I want to say. He sung Close in the Distance for Endwalker, which, honestly, if you haven't heard that song, it's amazing. And lastly, and this one was one of the newer ones, it was from the Arcadian, which was the raid series for Final Fantasy XIV, and that was Unleashed. He just got back from tour with the Primals not too long ago. Please go check out Jason's music on all music platforms that is available. I want to say it's available on Spotify for those songs that I've listed, except for Unleashed. Check that one out on YouTube until Square decides to put it on Spotify. But with all that said, Jason did sign the t-shirt, so that is another name on the memorial piece that I've been working on, which I plan on taking with me across the country. He also signed my Emmett Selk poster, so because I'm a big Final Fantasy fan, if you do not know, my son name is Clive, after Clive Rossfield from 16. And I think 16 is my favorite game of the series. I love Yoshi P as a producer, and the story writer they got for Shadowbringers and Endwalker wrote a phenomenal story for Final Fantasy 16. But I digress. Oh, one last bonus story I got for y'all, because this one is just a treat, and if I don't tell it now, I'm probably going to forget whenever I get to Cowboy Bebop. But full circle time. I'm a big Nathan Fillion fan. I'm a big Firefly fan. And hearing that one of the episodes of Firefly was recorded at the same soundstage as Bebop was. Kind of a full circle moment. I forget the episode. Mary's gonna kill me. But she can probably remember it whenever I get her on the interview if we talk about it. There's so many stories to discuss, and they're not all going to be told. And that's the sad part, is all these stories that exist about Kevin, about Animaze, just stories in general, if they aren't told and passed on generation to generation in some form, either in the old days where it was the old people who remembered and then pass it on to the youth and so on and so on and so on, or now with media, hard copy media, and then a way to read it. You got books, you got DVDs, you got CDs, you got vinyls, you got concrete slabs with drawings on them. And with each passing day, month, year, 100 years, 1,000 years, 10,000 years, stories will fade. And that makes me sad, if I'm being honest. But I am choosing to use the time that I have to tell both the story of an amazing man who was just a mystery, the mystery man himself, and to take this journey with myself, with all of you, and find the type of person I want to be, the type of person I want to become. And with this project, I hope to find that. I'm doing something that I enjoy. I'm hearing stories from people that, as a kid, I got to hear their voiceover work. I got to see them on the screens. And now I get to talk to them. I get to hear their stories about a man that they respected, about a man they worked with, a friend, a best friend, all sorts of different types of relationships. But all of them have one thing in common, is they all worked with Kevin, with Animaze, with Utaka, with the Claypools, with... It's a spider web, if you would. I heard from Mary herself that many actors who are staples today, I'll leave their names out for now, so if Mary wants to talk about it, she can, but some actors that were a staple of my childhood, that were a staple of many people's childhoods in film, video games, movies, anime, you name it. They started out in jobs that they hated but didn't want to leave because they were scared. Were put into positions to where they were living out of their cars, but they pushed themselves, and what's the saying go again? Don't be obnoxious, be persistent, and it will happen for you. As Kevin put it, he had seen so many people achieve their dream this way, and these actors, these talented people, they were persistent. And even when other people didn't believe in them, there were people that did. There were people that gave them a chance. And when they didn't, maybe it wasn't meant to be. But we can't exactly rewrite history. But we can look back at it and be like, without this person, this one person that we may not know who they are, history may have gone completely different. We may not have been able to meet the people that we form lifelong attachments to. And to be honest, that's the funny thing about stories. You listen to enough of them and you realize that what if history would have gone just ever so slightly differently? And it makes you appreciate all your experiences that much more. All the mistakes that I've made, I'd make them again. Because right now I'm here talking to you through this show, telling the stories of a man whose work pulled me out of a very dark place in my life. And even now, this project is pulling me out of a really bad spot. And so I look forward to keep sharing stories that I hear from these amazing people. Now, to wrap things up, I do want to say thank you if you've listened this far. I really appreciate it. If you have any input, comments, please do not hesitate to comment on your favorite platforms or email me via my website link. And I do want to give a true thank you once again. I think I've thanked you 3 times now, Mary, for giving me your time, for listening to me, for letting me listen to you. Time is one of the most valuable things in the world, and when somebody shares that with me, it means everything. I look forward to us continuing our conversations, me hearing your stories and allowing me to share your stories through this project, through the planned documentary that I plan on putting together, and any other projects relating to Kevin to Animaze. P.S. I do have Tokyo Revelations almost recorded. I wanted to get this out first because I wanted to strike while the iron was hot in my own brain. Stay tuned for that episode next week, and I look forward to sharing more stories I get to hear from Mary and Les, Joe, Yutaka, and whoever else I get to speak with in the next few weeks. Now, if you would be so kind, Kevin, let's hear the Just play us out.